We are back with another Chatcast. It's another beautiful Friday. We're at it again, doing one of the things that we love to do, talking at each other. Hopefully you're getting something out of these.
Yeah.
We really have fun putting this together, and definitely have you in mind when we do this to help you grow and expand as an artist. And you can hear our insight as somebody that's a little bit further along the road than you. Not much, but hey, we're here. So we're not quite roadkill yet on that road. So on this one, let's see. We just recently came from talking about expectations, then we were talking about criticism and how to handle it, how to give, how to receive, and I felt like those two topics fit really well together. This one's going to take a little bit of a different turn. It's going to be what artists or art styles influenced you the most. I could talk about this for at least 3 or 4 days straight. I can just keep making content about this, but I'm going to try to narrow it down. So in my journey, I talked about this when we said, when did the claw of heavy metal find me? It was when I was about 12-ish, going on 13, sitting in Pop's truck, driving back from the grocery store. Metallica, Sad But True coming on Keishi. That's just so Midwest. It's ridiculous, redonkulous, so ridiculous, it's ridiculous. But the thing with this is that I very quickly, because of the internet, went from Metallica to Meshuggah. I went home and I was on Napster and I typed in, I think I got Napster a couple of years after I found Meshuggah. So I was close to 15 maybe, 14, maybe I was close to 14 or so, because it's right before I went to high school. I was homeschooled and I went to high school for a little bit, and that was a terrible situation. We'll save for another Chatcast. I was so bored. It was ridiculous. But anyways, so it was right before I started going to high school. So it was right around the time I was 14, and I just typed in heavy metal on Napster, and the first thing that came up was Meshuggah's Future Breed Machine, and it was only like the first couple of minutes of it, and I had heard nothing like that, and it was incredible, and I felt so cool because my friends were listening to like Korn and Limp Bizkit, and here I am, just went straight from Metallica to Meshuggah. I went. There is no, you talk about like redlining it right away, and like hitting hard. Yeah, so I like skipped over a bunch of stuff and went straight to Meshuggah, and I loved it. And so I have to say that Meshuggah, the Swedish heavy metal band, is by far the reason I'm still into metal, the reason that it really took hold of me. Metallica is what made me play guitar, but I have to give Meshuggah credit for the way that they write music is something that inspired me. If you just peel back all of the layers of metal, it inspired me as an artist in this way. They don't care about genre when it comes to music. Yeah, they're metal, and that's a genre of itself because it's got the roar and the but it's like metal was the beginning of the 2000s period. It was the beginning of the fracturing of all of these genres. You had the post-hardcore started in the metalcore, then you got the post-metalcore, and then you got the post-rock, and then and everybody's dropping all of these genres, and it just kept getting more and more fractured. And you got blackened deathcore, and we're like this and that, and it's like, okay, yeah, I like this stuff. I like some of these bands. Okay, I'm not knocking the bands that are in these genres, but to me, it just became really silly. Because it's like, man, we're playing this game, and Meshuggah was different because they just crushed it. They didn't care. Their genre is Meshuggah. So from a standpoint, they really influenced me in that regard. And now a real classic band that influenced me in that regard was Led Zeppelin. If you listen to early Led Zeppelin, they didn't care about genre too much either. They had real hard driving rock songs, and then they had these giant epic, almost operatic style songs. And they had songs that were like folk songs almost. The way that he played the guitar and the lyrics, and I'm always drawn to those artists. I'm drawn to the artists that they have a genre, like Led Zeppelin's in classic hard rock, and Meshuggah's just in technical heavy metal. But at the same time, they really don't have a genre, and I kind of like that. I kind of like, as you can tell, that's my approach to life, kind of the jack of all trade, master of nothing. But I kind of like that. It keeps variety and like I felt like that's kind of what Meshuggah did for me. So it's like, you know, they made me realize that, like, you don't have to play by these rules. And so the only full-length album that I've written is several years old, and one of the main heavy metal websites that reviews music, Heavy Blog, picked up what I was putting down on that, and I felt like that's where I like, okay, recently, fairly recently, that I felt accomplished. It was like, okay, they picking up what I was putting down, which was I didn't follow a genre. I didn't want to. I wanted to just make a journey. I didn't want to just make, you know, another blah metal band. I wanted to do something that had like a journey, and it was something different. And so that's pretty much what I have to say about that, is that I want to pinpoint Meshuggah. Now, there's a ton of stuff I could talk to you about, who influenced my lead playing, which still ultimately ends up back to Meshuggah at some point in time. But there's a lot of different stuff in there, right? But I really wanted to emphasize that because it'll help you understand some of the things that I do on this project and with our brand, and why I like to try to influence us to be like, not have one thing, one niche. There's nothing wrong with that. There's people that just do the one thing and they do it well and they make a lot of money and they're real successful and they get real popular. But that's just not what I like to do. It's just too and limiting. Yeah. And it's just like there's a lot of potential left on the table. So anyways, what style, what artists influenced you the most currently, or however you want to look at that? What made a big impact on you in that regard?
I feel like this question is so stressful because there's just, along the way, there's been so many influential people, and because I don't necessarily cling to one specific like medium, to use a technical term, it's hard for me to say like these are the people that keep me going. So obviously I've talked about comic books being really big with me starting to draw. So the two comic book artists that I loved the most was Jack Kirby, who, if you've ever like the old 60s and 70s Spider-Man comics, that's him.
Okay.
Like, he did like a lot of the original X-Men, stuff like that. He's got this iconic style.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I could see it.
Yeah.
Just saying it.
So Jack Kirby obviously is a huge one, and then a more modern artist that I don't know, like I just really loved his style of comic book art was Jim Lee. He illustrated, like, there's a Batman graphic novel called Hush, and I have a pair of Converse that have Batman all over them, and he's the artist that drew the Batman that's on the Converse. I just love his style, and anytime that I've tried to draw comic book people, a lot of time, which is funny, is because Jack Kirby and Jim Lee aren't really similar, is they're very different, and so like anytime that I draw a comic, you know, cartoon related things, a lot of the time I kind of gravitate towards more Jim Lee just because of his style is a little bit more realistic, obviously, but the simplicity of like Jack Kirby, I always love that. If you're talking about like graphic design, there's a lot of artists that I look up to. One is a guy that like he literally kind of taught me how to illustrate on an iPad, and when I was in his class I did a terrible job of it. It wasn't until like years later that I actually got my own iPad and was able to start doing it myself and then learning. But his name was Brian Yap. He still does his thing. I loved his iPad illustrations. He actually he got hired because of his iPad illustrations by Adobe. And then there's other artists from like a long time ago, like Herb Ballin, he made texts, and the fonts that he created are just like really beautiful, and I love them, and that kind of typographic approach to graphic design really influenced a lot of my graphic design. And so like, oh man, and I could go on. Painting is like, I really love French Impressionists and like Post-Impressionists, so Van Gogh is obviously, well, not obviously, that's kind of a pretentious thing to say. Van Gogh would be Post-Impressionist, And then like Claude Monet, who's like one of my all-time favorite painters. He's an impressionist, and he's actually like the father of impressionism. But that's the paintings where they stopped being like super realistic, and they're like landscapes where they would just take their easels out into the countryside and paint like a sunny hill. But the colors that they would use and the way that they would use the colors, like if you see any of their artwork hanging in a museum, you can go up to it and it's like you squint your eyes and you feel like you're on a hot summer day in this field. It's like that kind of stuff influenced my color usage and how I use. And so honestly, I could just ramble on and on and on about like this is where these people influenced me, and so that I think that's why I became the kind of person where I try not to have a style. I'm sure if over the course of the next like decade I compile everything I've made and I look at it, I could probably compartmentalize a lot of it and be like, well, this is obviously my style. But intentionally speaking, I don't have a style just because there's been so many different realms where I've drawn inspiration from and where I wasn't really expecting to get inspired, that whenever I make something and I get to use color, I'm like, oh, this would be really cool to use colors like this, or oh, it would be cool to use text like this, and I have so many different realms that I've been inspired by that it's hard to really pinpoint that one thread of somebody. But like I said, if it was that one like root cause of my inspiration, it would have to be like Jack Kirby, which is going all the way back to the beginning of what I said. So.
Well, there you go, man. That's what it's all about, though. So thank you, Jack Kirby. Thank you, Meshuggah. Meshuggah and Jack Kirby. This is probably the only conversation on planet Earth and on YouTube where Meshuggah and Jack Kirby have ended up being the tag.
Yeah.
So if you guys are watching, we love you. And
Jack Kirby's dead.
Yeah, I realized that after I just said that. I was like, wait a minute, that guy's probably gone. So rest in peace, sir. Frederick Thorndale, I'm coming to raid your studio. All right, guys. See you later.